The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Welcome to episode 222 of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again. 3 little ducks.
Yeah.
I didn't think we'd make that long, to be honest with you. When we started way back, I didn't think we'd get to 222. Interesting.
I know. Well, next year, February, will be our 5th year anniversary. Can you believe it?
Don't stop picking out curtains now, Chris.
No, I won't. Although I was putting up the Christmas tree at the weekend, so we're on the run in now to another year, saying goodbye to 2023.
A bit early, Chris, a bit early.
Oh, December's here upon us. But we had our final get-together, didn't we, last week? We were up in Birmingham for our final meet-up, and fantastic to meet all of our members and new people as well. So really, really great evening. Thank you to everyone who attended. Also, it was great to see some of the younger generation there as well. Lorna with her 3 children, although they're young adults now.
Young adults, yeah, the twins and Kirsty as well. And obviously she was the smart one, I could tell that. But it was all good fun, all interesting, and really, really enjoyed it.
We did. And that kind of leads on quite nicely to today's topic, which is all around what they're now naming as generation rent, Kevin. So we've got Mr. Andy Haynes, who's Wealth Builder member and good friend of Wealth Builders, as our guest today. And Andy's written a book which really tackles what you could say is a challenge, is a problem for young people to be able to actually get their foot on the property ladder.
Yeah, it's a very poignant point, actually, Chris, because my second son, Simon, was looking at the weekend and getting excited, with 4 or 5 properties looked at over a weekend, and that excitement picks up. But the emotion actually was part of his thesis when he did his property degree, about the emotion and the psychology of the young first-time buyers. And he felt it himself. He felt the kind of internal pressure of looking at properties. And Andy's right. Andy Haynes, great job, friend of Wealth Builders, super nice guy, consummate professional, as you'll hear. So many of our younger people are either denied getting on the property market because property prices increase so much, or so many of them feel like they can't get on. And I think that's the point that Andy's raising.
Yes. So let's not wait around. Let's head on to our conversation today with Mr. Andy Haynes. Okay, it's my pleasure today to welcome Mr. Andy Haynes to Wealth Talk. How are you, Andy?
Yes, I'm very good. Thank you, Christian. It's good to be here.
Now, Andy, just before we get into today's conversation, let me read a quick introduction so our listeners know a little bit about your background. And you've got a wealth of business experience behind you, Andy, ranging from senior retail career to car dealership management. And for many years, you were also a producer and a presenter at the BBC, which has also since enabled you to have a successful career as a public speaker. And many of our listeners will be familiar with you, I'm sure. And nowadays, you're an award-winning property investor, property trainer and mentor, author and broadcaster, and you've got your own podcast too. But not content with all of that, you're also a founder director at Bradley Haynes Law, a full-service solicitor firm based in Worcester. So there's a lot going on, Andy, and today we're really pleased to be welcoming you to talk about your brand new book, which is called No More Rent.
There it is. Yeah, brand new book, No More Rent. The reason why I wrote this book is that I've been investing in property, Christian, for a little while. When I worked at the BBC, I recognised, and I loved that day job, but I recognised I didn't have enough money for my pension. And so if I could just get together my own little portfolio of properties that would give me a residual style income, that would be a great way that I could eventually retire. And I managed to do that, which was very successful. But the big thing I recognised was that a lot of people today are in what we call generation rents, that they don't ever think they could ever buy their own property. Property rents are so high they can't save for deposits. And I decided to do something about that because I wanted to really help them to realize that there is a way if they want to. And I think the thing about generation rent is that lots of communities are sort of talking people about they're only ever going to be renting. Well, in reality, there's lots of things that you can do to buy your own property. And the people I really want to help, Christian, are the people who, A, are probably ex-service people. The reason for that is that they, of course, been serving our country, but they've also been sort of very regimented way, sort of getting up, doing, going, been told what to do most of the day. When they come out into main civvy life, they maybe don't know how they can sort of get their own property and get onto the property ladder. Maybe they don't know how to get their own jobs or what income they need to get a property. My book will help them for that as well. And the other thing I want to help people with, Christian, is I'm well aware that because of the gender pay gap, there's a lot of ladies that will struggle to buy their own property because when you go for a mortgage, they will take your wage and they multiply that by a factor of 4 or 5, depending on the lender. And that determines the amount that you can borrow. Now, typically ladies will earn less than men for doing the same job. And so therefore that means they can borrow less money. And I don't think that's fair. My book actually helps ladies similarly to be able to get onto the property ladder so that they can then start to have their own place.
You've had exposure to property for a long time, Andy. Where does it go back to for you yourself?
I started investing in a serious way back in 2002, 2003. I had become an accidental landlord prior to that, sort of mid-1990s. Unaware, though, that that's really what I was doing. But I consciously made an effort back in 2002 in order to grow my own portfolio whilst I was working at the BBC.
And how do you see the difference between back then and now in terms of the difficulties that exist for first-time buyers? Because surely property prices are just simply too high now, aren't they, for first-time buyers?
It's true. Property prices are really high, Christian, but then property prices have always been too high. I mean, going back to when I bought my own very first house, which actually I was fortunate to buy sort of, 1983, 1984, something like that. And I remember the house just in round pounds was about 25,000, which is slightly less than that. But the reason why I'm using 25,000. When I bought that, it was an awful lot of money. Could I afford it? Well, probably not. But I knew I needed to get a foot on the ladder. I wanted to get a foot on the ladder, which is more important. But here's the point. I remember my uncle saying to me, Andy, how can you possibly afford £25,000? Because the generation before, when he bought his house, it was only £5,000. And he thought that was dear back then. So property prices are always more expensive. 5,000 up to 25,000 was a huge jump for just one generation. That same property, by the way, Christian, 25,000 is now worth nearly 300,000. It's amazing how property prices have crept up over the years. So in the fact that property prices will always be stretched, they'll always be pushed up. We need to be creative in finding ways that we can get onto the property ladder if we really want to do so. And I'm really aiming to help people there are great ways that they can do it, simple ways that they can do it, but they have got to have that inner self that they really want to get onto the property ladder because it isn't easy, but I know it is possible. Yeah,
and there's some great statistics in the book that you've shared. I'll read a few of those out. 46% of under 35s now renting from private landlords. 41% of the average couple's income is spent on private rentals, and 23% of families living in private rented homes. So there's a real need for this information out there, Andy.
Well, there's a few things to say on this, please, Christian, because the one is I'm not against renting. If people want to rent, that's absolutely fine. There's lots of benefit in people renting property. For example, any maintenance that needs doing on the property, you would get the landlord to cover that for you. If you're buying your own house, then of course you would need to find it. So people, and the other great thing about renting is that you could be transient more. Maybe you're on that career ladder. Maybe you want to stay somewhere for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but then you want to move and freely move, just give a month's notice and be able to move to a different part of the country. In fact, a different part of the world if you want to. So there's lots of benefits in renting. But I'm well aware that rents, of course, are being pushed sky high. The reason why rents are going up and up and up is because there's not enough property out there. It's a simple case of supply and demand. And in effect, if you're renting, I know for a fact that buying a property, even though you've got to maintain it yourself, the monthly outgoing for a mortgage would be a lot less than if you are doing renting. So there's lots of benefits for people to want to get onto that property ladder. And of course, if you buy and hold it for a long enough amount of time, those same property prices will go up. So you will then have a net worth, which is useful for you to leave as a legacy or maybe upsize your property in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure, those people that are currently renting, but they aspire to buy their first property, Andy, they understand the benefits that actually the mortgage may be less, but the big problem, the big obstacle in their way is saving up that deposit. Do you have any tips or strategies as to how people might be able to, to accelerate that process?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the deposit is a big factor, and it will vary as to how much deposit you need to put down at any one time. That's down to the mortgage lenders, and it's down to various government schemes that help. For example, there's lots of ways with ISAs and things like that currently, but that all may change with new governments. There's lots of ways the government will help and support people. And currently, deposits on a mortgage, you can get a mortgage for around 5%. Now, the more you can put down as a deposit, will help you, because you will get a better mortgage rate if you can afford to put down more money as a deposit. And so the things I would say to people is, if you seriously want to get onto the property ladder, there's a little bit of a balance, because I'm well aware that, if we're younger, sort of in our 20s, 30s, which, the average age of the first time buyer is around 35. Lots of us also want to have a life. We want to go out socializing. We want to go out maybe finding partners and doing all those kind of things. I know I wanted to do that when I was that age too. But there comes that little fine balance of saying, actually, maybe we can cut back on that a little bit, because there's a whole new purpose now. I want to buy my own property. You'd be amazed as to how we can save quite a lot of money I'm not suggesting you don't go out. I just mean cutting back on the ways that you go out or the ways that you spend money, because there's now a whole new purpose. You want to get your own property. So that's the first thing to do. We all pay out lots of money in subscriptions. Do we really need to do that? Are there ways we can do it for less money? Which is another consideration as well. And I'm talking here about the Costa coffees and the Starbucks and those kinds of things. It's lovely going out socializing, but there are other ways that we can go out and socialize sort of on a lesser budget to help save us some money. And then, of course, the money that we're earning in our day jobs, it's lovely when hopefully we get an annual pay rise. That doesn't always happen. But when we do get a wage rise, we don't necessarily save that money. It just means that we just live slightly better. And, it just goes on various things. And it's about making that conscious effort to say, actually, I'm getting an extra £50 a month, £100 a month, whatever it is. Let me now deliberately save that. And that, again, would soon mount up for people to have this little pot of money that they can put to one side. Birthdays, those kinds of things. Maybe you put that towards your deposit for your property. Holidays, maybe you just take a slightly lesser holiday and, you can save some of that money as well. It's about being conscious ways of finding deposits.
Yes, absolutely. I guess having a clear plan and focusing on that. I know the word focus is close to your heart, with forming part of your company name there as well, Andy. And one of the testimonials I've seen on your book, No More Rent, was from Daniel Hill, Young Property Entrepreneur of the Year. And I remember on an interview for Wealth Talk, he said sometimes you do need to just hunker down and, as you say, remove some of those unnecessary expenses perhaps, and just really minimize the outgoings until you achieve that goal of perhaps your first deposit.
Yeah, I think when you're doing it for a purpose, Christian, it actually becomes a bit of fun. You actually look forward to be able to save this money here, save that money there, because it's going to a real purpose. It's going towards my house buying fund. And then because you so much want to buy that property, you actually can enjoy that whole process.
Well, talk about purpose, a reason why. You're a loving husband, a father, a granddad as well, Andy. So it's without a doubt that those roles are really a driving force for you. And we have just launched WealthBuilders for families as well. So this is really pertinent timing, certainly for our community, because we know, banker mum and dad is not always available, right? So pleased that we're able to talk about this subject today.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? I mean, I think it's lovely that mums and dads do want to help their children, which is lovely. I would want to do that as well. And I also think there's also sometimes we think about a legacy that's coming to us, maybe our favourite aunt or maybe a grandparent, or it could even be our parents that might one day leave us some funds, which is lovely. The challenge with that, I think, it's a bittersweet thing. We would love to have the money to help us get onto the property ladder. But the other balancing side of that, Christian, is that we don't want the ultimate that they passed away in order to get that money. So we want to push well into the future when we get that money, but we can so do with that money right now, because property prices today, even those we've already talked about, property prices are quite high. Of course, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they'll be even higher. So there's a way and a fine balance. And one of the things I do talk about in the book is looking at ways as to how we can get money right now from our parents, grandparents, favourite aunts, but in a way that they can still be alive to see us doing something good with that money, and obviously putting it to very good use and not spending it wildly or whatever.
Yeah, no, indeed. And your book is full of different tips. And are there any things that we've not talked about so far, Andy? Anything else for first-time buyers that they may need to consider?
Yeah, I think the big thing to think about is that you do need to get yourself mortgage ready. And obviously it's lovely if you can buy it for cash, but a lot of us can't buy a property for cash. But who knows, that sort of legacy you might get left might mean you can buy your property for cash. But for most of us, it's about getting ourselves mortgage ready. And what do I mean by that? Well, you do need to think about your credit rating. Lots of us live on credit cards. There's nothing wrong with having a credit card, but you need to think about the amounts you're paying off. If you're paying the minimum per month, then when you come to get a mortgage, they will look at all of those factors and determine as to whether you can afford the house or not. And if you're living sort of on the maximum of your credit cards, then that wouldn't necessarily help you. So a few ways I can help you is to always think about paying more than the minimum, which is good. That means you're paying it down faster than you're adding to it. Lots of us will have 2, 3, 4, 5 cards, even more credit cards than that. Look to pay off credit cards so you have only got 1 or 2. The reason for that is that they're looking at then as to whether you are living off credit all of your life and whether a mortgage would be the right thing for you. So to be able to pay off your credit cards and only have 1 or 2 would be a good thing. The way to do that is to pay off the most expensive first. Once you've paid that off, then of course the money you were paying on that one, you can afford then to up what you're paying on the other credit cards. That means you pay them off sooner. When you've paid that off, you can up it even more then to pay off the other credit cards. And then the ones you've paid off, I would suggest that you cancel. Even though they're at a zero balance, that still, strangely enough, goes against you for credit rating, because the mortgage lenders will look to say, well, I know you're only spending on, let's say, 1 or 2 cards, but you have got these 2 or 3 other ones with the zero balance. If we give you a mortgage today, you could then go out the next day and maximize on those 3 other cards to then obviously have not enough spending money. So I would suggest pay off your cards, but then close down the cards as well to have just 1 or 2. And just to be clear, mortgage lenders love you having a credit card. And the reasons for that is that they know that you can manage your money. They know that you can manage credit. They know that you're managing it by paying it off. And ideally, you want to have a zero balance every month by paying it off in full. I know there are pinch points throughout the year when we maybe need to spread it over a month or 2. But if they see you doing that and they know that you're managing your money, that will help you to get a mortgage.
Yeah, very helpful indeed. Thank you, Andy. Now, property investors will always be looking at the market conditions and interest rates and all of these things as we approach 2024. Perhaps it's slightly different for first-time buyers because they just want to own their first home, don't they? So in terms of timing, looking ahead to 2024, any comments at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it, what's happening with the Bank of England base rate. The Bank of England base rate will determine the mortgage rates. And of course, at the moment, we're sort of seeing mortgages at 5%, 6%, maybe slightly more than that. And it's quite an interesting time. I remember when the Bank of England base rates was normally 6% to 7%. I know that's a few years ago. And, so to me, the rates we've got right now are actually quite normal rates. Of course, we've lived because we had the bank crash of 2008, 2009, where the government then and the Bank of England brought the base rate right down. It went as low as 0.1% at one time, but mostly it was sort of around 0.25% or 0.5% at that time. And we were used to those for really many, many years. So to have interest rates right now at 6%, I realize it's higher than we've been used to, but it is quite normal. And I think we need to get used to interest rates being around this level. They will fluctuate a little bit less, a little bit more. And so it's about budgeting to be able to get a property at that amount of money. Now, you then need to determine which house you could buy. Maybe your first house is not your forever home. It might just be a stepping stone for you then to be able to add value to it. And we talk in the book about ways that you can add value to your property. So you are forcing the prices up. So someone else will come and buy that property. So in many ways, it's good to have a house that is a little bit run down. And this is another interesting point. Most of us want to live in a house that is perfect. We just move in with our furniture and have a lovely home. Well, I'm suggesting that maybe you buy the one that's looking a little bit tired, a little bit old, the one that people don't want to buy because it's unloved. They're the ones you can buy a little bit cheaper. You can soon add value to it, force the price to go up, but then you could then remortgage onto a bigger product and move your way up that property ladder. And for 2024, I don't really see property prices changing an awful lot for where they are now. I don't know what it's like around the country. Where I live, property prices did dip a little bit recently, but they've sort of flatlined a bit more. And I can see it just bobbing on a little bit through 2024. And I think we might even see then some growth as we go into 2025. So right now, I think is a good time to be buying property. And there's another reason why I'm saying this, Christian, is because a lot of the general public will be uncertain as to what's happening in the property market. And so therefore they won't be putting their properties on the market and therefore they won't be moving home. And because they're not moving home, then people won't be able to sell their property wise. And so they will love you if you're coming along to them saying, actually, I'm interested in you buying your house. And they will then talk price because people are wanting to sell, but there's not that many people wanting to buy. So if you're in the market wanting to buy, this could be a great opportunity as we go into 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, and I know there's many, many more creative strategies just like that inside the book. Your brand new book, No More Rent, First Time Buyer's Key to Unlocking Home Ownership. That's out now, Andy. Where should people head to pick up a copy?
Well, there's a couple of ways you can buy a copy. One is directly from my website, which is nomorerent.uk. So simply nomorerent.uk. That's the best place to get it from, although it is available at Amazon and it might be available in your local bookshop as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And for Wealth Builder listeners to the Wealth Talk podcast, I believe you put together a short audio recording, which gives a taster of the first couple of chapters or so. And we will make that available. If you'd like to download that, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/222, today's episode number. So thank you for supplying us with that as well, Andy.
Delighted to offer that. It's me narrating the book from the very beginning through as to why I got involved in property and what the opportunity is in the marketplace right now. It goes up to sort of mostly part of chapter 2, and it's about 29 minutes long, give you a real flavour for how you can go out there and buy your own property. And of course, if it's not you, you may be on the property ladder already. Maybe you've got your children, your nieces, your nephews, or maybe it's sort of a friend, a neighbour that you know you'd want to inspire to get onto the property ladder. It really will help anybody wanting to get their own first home.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. We talk about the ripple effect, and I'm sure this will lead to helping many, many people. So good luck with the book, Andy, and we look forward to working with you much closer in 2024.
Delighted to be part of Wealth Builders. I've had my own pension with you and you know, I like to inspire other people, but it's great being a part of something and being able to give back as well. So thanks for having me here today, Christian.
Okay. Good chatting to Andy as always there, Kevin, and some really good tips that he's got in his book. We can pull out a few of those and discuss them a little bit further. But before we do that, let's head on over to Trustpilot and read out one of our latest reviews that we have received. And let me skim through here. And I know that there was one that caught my eye, which is from Neil, who says, "What can I say? Since finding property education and the Wealth Builders Academy, I believe my biggest win to date is the fact that I have found who I truly am as a person and as an entrepreneur and property professional. I believe I'm now truly living a life that is true to myself and my values, and I'm being able to express this through my calling, which is the property pillar. And I'd like to say a massive thank you to Mr. Kevin Whelan for the platform provided, his shared vision, and the values that he brings to Wealth Builders. And also say a massive thank you to Christian, Richco and Helen for all the support they've shown me over the first 12 months within the Academy. And he's also saying he's become a compliant property agent, and he nearly forgot we've raised around £1 million in joint venture finance and raised £500,000 of development finance for our development company. So a pretty good first 12 months for Neil there.
Do you know what I liked about Neil is he actually called me up to say thank you. You know, he reached out and said, you know, I've done my 12 months, and just to let you know, I'm renewing because you guys are doing a great job, and I want to thank you personally, Kevin, for what you're doing. And I think it's great that they get to a point where they're even attracting finance from other parties. They're so confident about their ambitions, about their drive, about their vision. And I think vision is critical when it comes to raising money from private finance. But also, as Andy was saying, you know, the vision of seeing yourself as a property owner and putting yourself in the right place to be able to almost get those 3 little ducks all lined up. Mm-hmm. Got to get your ducks lined up when you're going to get in the property market. And we've been talking about some of those things, and good to see that Andy's sharing some of our philosophies, not least things like debits, you know, plugging all the leaks in your life and getting that right. And I'm sure you can send a link to that, Chris, because debits is an important process for Wealth Builders that helps people when they're getting started, really, which is perfect for the first-time buyers, really. We're launching a new one soon, aren't we, which is called the Income Maximizer. Many, many ways to be creative to find ways to increase your net take-home pay. If you can do that, that's going to increase your mortgage capacity as well. And some really good tips on the use of credit cards, both the good and the bad. And those things came up in my book, 2004, when I wrote that one, called Save a Fortune, where interest rates at the time, were probably around 6-7%. But I remember when I bought my first property in 1984, interest rates were 15.4. So, it's a very, very different world. I don't think we're set for 0%, 0.1%, 1% interest rates for the future. So I think the affordability issue is going to be a key one, which is where the deposit side of things, as Andy outlined, becomes critical. And it's hard, isn't it, to save money for deposits and keep saving, because by the time you catch up with the deposit, the property's already out of your reach. So that's where Bank of Mum and Dad become increasingly important. And I'll be writing some materials for our family's content about Bank of Mum and Dad and how to be the best possible Bank of Mum and Dad, and what the pros are, what the cons are, and how to get involved if you don't really want to be just gifting money. Lots of different ways, not least, I was thinking about my own son buying a property with his girlfriend. They want to keep their legal life separate with proper declarations of trust and those sorts of things. So lots of things to learn and understand, but Andy does a good job of positioning that.
If you're a regular listener to Wealth Talk and WealthBuilders material, then you'll know that our main focus is on helping our members to move from a place of financial insecurity through to security, and then onwards to financial independence. And that's all based around our model of the 7 pillars of wealth, Kevin, 7 assets that you can use to generate recurring income. And pillar number 1, we call home capacity. Now, I don't know if you know, Kevin, but Spotify have now just added audiobooks to their repertoire. So as well as Audible, you can now listen to audiobooks on Spotify. And I've been listening through the Rich Dad collection. And Rich Dad's, one of his famous quotes is, "Your home is not an asset." So I just want to throw this one out to you, Kevin, and see what your thoughts are on that comment.
Well, I think there's never a definitive when it comes to wealth, because no matter how thinly you slice anything, there are always 2 sides to it. So your home can be an asset. It can be an asset even if you just want to live in it mortgage-free like me. Not necessarily from a recurring income point of view, but from a peace of mind point of view and a quality of relationship point of view. Remember that wealth is a holistic part. It's about your financial wealth, your mental wealth, your physical health, your relationship wealth. So from a perspective of many people want to become mortgage-free, that's great. However, in the context of where building wealth is concerned, I think for many people, the property becomes a potential asset, a latent asset, as I would call it, in really one of 3 main ways. One way is using the space, finding the space that you have around you, whether it's inside and outside, and creating space that you can rent or create some kind of value from. And we've got many, many of our Wealth Builder clients and members have done that. Secondly, the ability, once you build equity, you get a gap between the value of the property and the value of any mortgage, if a mortgage exists. Then you tap into that to raise deposits for other property, for example, which then gets you accumulating property as an asset in all of its different types. And the third is, well, it could even be older people, baby boomers, like me, when they get to a certain point when they've got properties with no mortgages on them, do they tap into that equity either for themselves to create an income stream because they didn't do a great job with their retirement planning and wealth planning generally? Or do they want to raise capital from that to help with Bank of Mum and Dad and potentially reduce inheritance tax as well? So lots of different ways, Chris, that a property can be considered an asset. But, I can't argue with Robert's view, which is it's not an asset while it isn't putting money into your life. And I get that. And I think the point that Andy's picked up on, which is really the generational shift between the baby boomers. I mean, we have the silent generation, the ones older, those in their 80s now probably, didn't talk about money. The baby boomers did the best job of accumulating, largely with final salary pensions and taking advantage of property increases in value. And then the millennials who've kind of largely been forgotten and finding it much tougher. And they've seen a life almost completely around uncertainty. They see uncertainty everywhere they look. And that can cause them a challenge. And Andy makes the point that many people want to rent for the transient nature of that. But also is that feeling of uncertainty. Where do you want to be? How do you want to be? And maybe they feel like they'll never get on the ladder. So it's always there's no requirement you don't have to own a home to be wealthy. You could be perfectly happy with a higher level of recurring income, but some of that recurring income paying rent because you pay for your life from the recurring income of the assets you own. So if that happens to be rent, that's fine. But I think the vast majority of people on this sceptred aisle, really want to own their property. We seem to have a love affair with property. And I understand that because I wanted to do that in my 20s and so do people now. But that age is being pushed back and back and back, isn't it, really?
Yes. And as Andy mentioned, this book isn't just aimed at the young generation, but also ex-service people, and also recognizing that there is a gender pay gap and that some women may find it harder as well to get mortgages and to build up deposits.
Inevitably the case. And I think he makes a really good point about that, not least when you think also about high levels of divorce rates and so on. Then people can be single parents and they can be on their own very quickly. And that can cause, challenges with finances too. So I think he makes some very good points, and it's a good book and it's good timing. I think he's offered to Wealth Builder members a kind of a sneak peek, hasn't he? A little kind of peek behind the curtain to see if you like him. And I think, obviously we like him. We've worked with Andy before and we know what a lovely guy and a very humble and generous man he is too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can download that sneak peek, the 29-minute recording there of the first couple of chapters. Head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/222 and also check the show notes and head to that URL to download a copy of Kevin's book, Save a Fortune, which is 20-year anniversary next year then, Kevin. Maybe
I never even thought about that till now when I just realised when...
Time for an update.
Crumbs 2000. I need to do an update, don't I?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I'll get AI to help me, I think. That's obviously going to be the way to do that. If we can get that downloaded, Chris, into AI and then rewritten with a 21st century twist to it, then that will be a perfect way to show people that AI can be a great assistant to what you're trying to do. And that's another issue we'll be tackling in the future as well, Chris, which is, what AI, do you fear it or do you embrace it? And these are challenging times for our young people and for us too. And AI is going to have a big role to play.
Yeah, it sure is. Okay, we hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode. If you know someone who may benefit, then please hit the share button. And Kevin will be back same time, same place next week.
See you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the Wealth Builders membership site to help you create, build and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.